I'm Representative John Payne. It's my pleasure today to be here with Major Dick Winters. Major Winters is not only a constituent of mine in the 106th District, but he's a longtime friend. You know, there's been a lot of books, a lot of movies about Operation Market Garden, A Bridge Too Far, some of the things that happened. You were an active participant. You were there. What are your feelings on Market Garden?
The British are wonderful planners, and if you want to make plans for an operation or to do anything, you cannot top the British. They're very good in that. But if you wanted to execute it, you better do it yourself. But you can use the British plan. But in this case, the plans were, they had never run an airborne operation before. And in running this thing, they made too many wrong decisions. And the ones that suffered the most is their own British paratroopers on the other side of the Rhine River up at Arnhem, who were, they jumped 8,000 men in there, and they only got 6,500 out that lived through it. But it was for example, our mission was to capture this bridge over the Dam, the Bohemia Canal, and the only problem was we jumped about 3 miles, 2.5 miles away from it. So we had to assemble and then walk to it. Well, they had this small group of Germans that were on guard duty on this bridge, and they had all the time in the world to set the charges and be ready for us and blow it up right in our face. And as soon as they did that, then they withdrew. But the important point was that the Germans, the Dutch, the Holland people, with their intelligence, they knew that the German force that was guarding this part of Holland at this point was no more than a good-sized police force. So if we'd have jumped on the objective, I'm sure as soon as we were coming down, they might have shot a couple of us, but they would have taken off on the run, and we'd have taken the bridge. Result, when they finally got there, and the British, of course, have to stop and have tea when they reached that point, after that, then they got across the bridge, but that was all wrong. And it was just one thing after another like that in the whole thing. It was not planned properly.
You mentioned the British tea, and it makes me think of another food question. It's very clear in the book about the British rations, the 14 ones, and compared to the Americans' rations and the Hershey bars.
Yeah. Yes.
Were those British rations that bad?
Yeah, they're pretty rough. Pretty rough. And fortunately, you know, in Holland, agriculture area, and we're out in the fields, there's a lot of gardens, and so we can go out and help ourselves to turnips and vegetables we could glean out of the garden. So you blend that in with the British 14-in-1 and make a stew. So that helped you get through.
How important were the Hershey bars?
Well, the Hershey bars were very, very important, and if possible, they always accused the officers of taking the chocolate bars, the almond bars, you know, but that isn't true. But they were very important. They were very important not only for yourself, but you used to share with the children, because they hadn't even had the taste of chocolate at this point in their life, the younger ones. The chocolate bar was very important.
Did you know that Fort Indiantown Gap, located in Lebanon County, is home to Pennsylvania's only Veterans Memorial? C.J. Frederick of Westchester, Bucks County, submitted the winning design that now honors those men and women who have sacrificed their lives in defending this great country. Dedicated to the Commonwealth on October 7, 2001, the Veterans Memorial is surrounded by freestanding walls and houses an amphitheater, which can accommodate large crowds during an event. Strategically placed in the front of the amphitheater is a tomb that reminds visitors of those who gave their lives protecting the freedoms of this nation. The design suggests a war-damaged structure in which Frederick wanted to impress upon those visiting the horrific arena of war. Now you know.
Chapter 9 in the book, Dick, talks about what I think was in my mind, your most heroic action in both the book and Band of Brothers. I think you should have gotten the Medal of Honor for the operation at the dike. I mean, I can't personally envision standing on top of an earthen dike and looking down on 100 SS troops, whether they were looking at me or not. They're down there, and you put your weapon at your hip and start firing, and they're firing back at you and scattering and running. You dump the first clip and put another one in. You dump the second clip, put another one in.
Right.
What were you thinking? Because I have to be honest, I would have been going the other way behind that dirt bank. Now that's a difference in training, that's a difference in men, but clearly you were totally exposed to that enemy fire.
I want to point out that the guy that was standing up there on the dike that day, at that particular moment, is not the guy that you're talking to today. And it was in a mental state. I don't know how to explain it, but I've never was there before, never been in that condition since. But at that point, when I started that charge across the field, let me back off here for a minute. There's one thing here. If you remember when we went in to take care of the troops on Normandy, and we made a flanking attack. We were taking them on one at a time. And in this case, in the charge, we were making a frontal attack. There's quite a difference here. And there was no other way to do it. There was no hedgerows like we had in Normandy and so forth. You had to make a frontal attack. It was the only approach to it. But in making that decision, when I started out to run across there, I was running faster than I ever ran before in my life. I've never run that fast since. And the thing about it was everybody else was moving so slow. I couldn't understand it. My men were moving so slow, I couldn't understand it. I got up there and jumped up on the dike, as you're relating here. And as I look at the Germans down there and see in the position I'm in, I'm behind them, very luckily, just luck. But they're moving so slow. See, it's not only my men that are moving so slow, but the Germans are moving so slow. And I can't understand why they're moving so slow. I'm normal, but they're not. So in standing there, I'm in a different state of mind than I've ever been in before. Hope I never get there again. But I was that pumped up, that, I don't know how else to explain it. But as that pumped up, that they were moving slow and I was normal, and my men are very slow and getting up to me because, Lord dear, they're 100 yards behind. So that, hope that explains it in some sense.
It does. Were you cognizant of the fact that you were changing, cartridges? I mean, because it almost sounded in the book that it was just automatic.
It was automatic.
You were shooting, putting another one in, putting another one in.
It was automatic. There's one little memory. It's a memory worth sharing with you. And jumping up on the dike, as the picture points out, there's this young soldier right across the road from me. Actually, he was not out in the field like we show in the film. He was directly on the other side of that road, about 2 steps away, because it was just a narrow dirt road coming up from the river. And he was the outlook. He was their outpost. He was the guy who was supposed to be keeping his head up and keeping observation that somebody didn't pull a trick on him like we had just done. Somebody to come up and catch them while they're keeping their heads down from our covering fire. That was his job, to keep them informed. He didn't do it. He put his head down as well. And I came up directly across from him, eyeball to eyeball. And he was just as shocked as could be. I leveled off at him. And the thing that remembers, I can never forget, was he smiled. And as he smiled, I shot him.
No, wait! Wait for the signal! Jesus.
And then wheeled my course to the right, and I was behind these other troops, and so I was actually shooting into their back, because naturally, if you're in a shopping mall or any place, if somebody is shooting, you start to move away from the sound, away from the danger, and that's exactly what they did. They got up and they start running away from me. So I was shooting them at their back as they were going towards the dike. And of course that played right into my my squad coming up along the dike. And they were getting in position just at this time as they got there. They were here, and they were on top of the dike now, and they were shooting down on them. We had them boxed. And that's just the way it went, just that quick. And there's one thing on it, couple things here. One thing, it gives you the impression there was about 100. Actually, there was 2 companies of them, not just 100. There was 200. And if you, in the looking at the series, if you notice, they show a windmill in the background. Well, the second company was assembled around that windmill. The company I had come up in back of was along the dike here. And it was after this shooting and all this excitement down here that company went into a mass retreat as well. So we had 2 companies. Now the other thing, I want to keep the record straight here, so to speak. This group had come to Arnhem. They had come in, they had been in Normandy. This comes out in the history, of course. They had been in Normandy, been shot up, come back off the line, received replacements just like we had after Normandy. And now we're coming back on the line for the first time. So they had come up through Germany. They stopped at Arnhem for 2-3 days to rest up before being committed to the island to wipe us out. And so during that time, there's a couple SS, a small unit of SS come up into Arnhem as well. The way I know this is to go back and through fortunately being able to get a hold of some diaries from people who were in Arnhem at the time. They kept diaries just like I kept diaries and other people kept diaries. So you get a diary of a guy who's telling exactly, living in Arnhem, from the time we jumped until we get into this fight on, this would be on October the 9th. And, correction, October 5th. But, so that these troops were actually 369th Volksgrenadiers, but they did have blended in with them some SS, but so they weren't all SS. But the SS were blended in there, obviously, to help keep the 369th boys on the ball, because they were hard-nosed. They were hard-nosed soldiers, and that. But that should be understood that they weren't all SS.
Spoken as a true hero, you're trying to make it sound like you were on a dike, their backs were towards you. As soon as you started shooting, they started running away.
Yeah.
Seems to me in the book and the movie, they were shooting back at you, Dick.
Well, yeah, but there's a good point there too. Where they're trying to shoot back at me. Picture of this massive guy is running away from you. Now, every once in a while, there was a guy who got his senses about him and would turn around and try to shoot. But again, as I'm standing there, he looked so slow as he was leveling his rifle. Actually, I'm the only one that's wrong here. But as he's leveling his rifle, you see, here's this mass to this men, and they're in a mass. They push him off balance. So his shot goes in the air. So he wasn't getting a good shot at me. But there was a number of people, yeah, were shooting back. But the rest of them, in their mad escape, so to speak, to get away from this, were pushing those fellows off balance.
Did you know that located behind the state capitol building in Harrisburg is a piece of land known as Soldiers Grove? Legislation permitting the designation of Soldiers Grove was signed into law by Governor Bob Casey on October 30th, 1987. Soldiers Grove, which is surrounded by the 10 largest trees in the area, contains 9 bronze plaques honoring the veterans of the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the American Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam conflict. Also displayed in Soldiers Grove is a plaque honoring those unknown veterans who participated in those same wars. Now you know.
Let's talk about Bastogne a little bit.
Okay.
Situation normal. Going into Bastogne without proper winter gear, without enough ammunition. Some of the guys didn't have weapons.
Right.
Did you know about how bad the situation was?
No, I had no idea. We had no concept at all of what we were getting into. It was just a matter of, as is brought out in the story, here we go again. We had no idea what we were getting into. As pointed out, many of the weapons were in ordnance, getting repaired from Holland, and so we were short on weapons. Naturally, we didn't keep ammunition in Mormillon ready to go off on a mission. So there was just a small amount of ammunition available. And the men were told that, you know, you'd be here till spring, and then you can look forward to jumping across the Rhine River in the spring as we go for Berlin. So this came as a little surprise. So we were not ready for it. And anyway, mentally, equipment-wise, no plans whatsoever. As a matter of fact, to illustrate that point, Colonel Strayer, the battalion commander, he was at a wedding of the British regimental commander that had jumped on the other side of the Rhine. He was getting married in England, so Strayer was at his wedding in England. And Higgins, the assistant division commander, he was also in England giving lectures on what we had learned in Holland. And General Taylor, the division commander, was back home in Washington. Now the story that we got was that he was back home in Washington to give counsel to Marshall, General Marshall, and so forth, on the restructure of airborne units. And that was in defense of the fact that I think most of us felt that he was back home with his family for the Christmas holidays. And we were caught going to Bastogne, and he was off base. But stop for a minute there and don't be too hard on the guy. And think of the fact as we come in close to Normandy, and the Germans knew that D-Day was very, very close. And where did General Rommel, what decision did he make that was wrong? As we know, he went home to his wife's birthday party, took her a pair of shoes from Paris or something. And so he wasn't with the troops. He was not in position for D-Day. So the fact that Taylor was back home, we'll say visited his wife for the holidays, he wasn't the only guy that was caught off base.
Two specific questions about Bastogne. The cold, the bitter cold, the snow. Ever experienced anything like that since?
No. No.
So the movie does a pretty good job of depicting just how cold and how miserable it was.
Definitely. You can't describe it. You can't describe it to live through it night after night, not knowing how long this is going to go on. It's a matter, say you're going out on a maneuver or something, and you know you're going to be out for 2 or 3 nights. Mentally, you're prepared. In this case, you didn't know how long is this going to go on. And on that point, on the cold, I think it's, you're not normally aware that the number of casualties that we had at Bastogne, about 1/3 of them were frostbite from the cold. So yeah, the casualties were high, but the frostbite was responsible for a good percentage.
How critical was George Rice's trips to bring in that ammunition?
Oh my, very important. We'll never forget him for being such a conscientious officer and getting us a couple loads of ammunition before, at the last second, and taking it right out from under the Germans. It was very important. And I can remember standing there on that as it came up, and I don't care who you are, what rank you had. I was battalion executive officer, but when he started throwing that ammunition out of that Jeep, I'm a captain, but I'm on my hands and knees fighting the rest of the guys for a few rounds of ammunition, because I didn't have any either. And you got in there and you fought for what little you could get.
You know, the saying in Bastogne was, you know, situation normal. We're surrounded, we're outnumbered,
Yeah.
We don't have enough ammunition,
Yeah.
clothing.
Yeah.
I pity the Germans.
Yeah.
Was it really that? I mean, we joked before we started the interview about how Patton didn't really rescue you. You guys didn't need rescued.
Yeah. Well, what else are you going to tell yourself? You're going to sit there and pity yourself? So that's the answer you give yourself. And the other thing is that on the subject of surrender, that's a subject that never came up. We never talked about it. We never thought about it. How can you? If you're going to be sit around pitying yourself and talking about it and thinking about it, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to convince yourself that you should surrender. That never happened. We never talked about it, never thought about it.